A little roundup of today's news, and I guess depending on where else you go for information and analysis, some of this may surprise you. So here is one story. The government's test and trace system for those with COVID-19 may not be fully operational until October, its chief operating officer has admitted. October. British Airways is toying with the idea or thinking of pursuing legal action against the government over a quarantine scheme that makes no sense to anybody. You put in quarantine when there is a risk of people coming into a relatively well-protected country from a relatively less protected country. We are literally doing the opposite. We've got still one of the highest infection rates in the world, and yet we're thinking we should quarantine people coming here. Face coverings are to be compulsory on public transport from June the 15th, something that, of course, the Mayor of London was calling for at least a month ago and possibly longer, but he was told that he was stupid. Why June the 15th? Why not today? Why not yesterday? I don't know. Ask Grant Shapps, a man that used to use false names to sell get-rich-quick schemes on the internet. This is our country. This is the United Kingdom. A man who used false names to sell get-rich-quick schemes on the internet. He's in charge of telling you what you should and shouldn't do with regard to public transport. Having told you that face masks were useless or pointless, or Sadiq Khan should sit down and be quiet, or shut up and go away, as Gavin Williamson would have put it, they're now saying that they need to be compulsory on public transport, which means that the teachers going to the schools that have reopened will have to wear face masks on public transport and then take them off when they get to the schools. I haven't finished yet. I haven't even finished yet. You've got the test and trace not ready till October. You've got the quarantine making no sense to anybody. You've got the face masks signalling yet another U-turn. Too little, too late, almost certainly. And then MPs could be asked to swap the conga line for the self-checkout queue, with plans being drawn up to abandon the system of queuing to vote only a week after it was introduced. Again, those words. I wonder who said, let's put Jacob in charge, said somebody somewhere in the last month. That almost sums up England, doesn't it? Who should we put in charge? Well, let's get the haunted pencil, put him in charge of something relatively complicated. And there it is, less than a week in place, and it's already falling apart. So much so that Brexit hardman Steve Baker filmed himself describing it as a complete farce and then went to vote for it. This is not... these are not isolated incidents. This is evidence of a broken country, a broken government. This is evidence of a regime that is completely unfit for purpose. And I would love you to try to deny that. I'd love you to tell me that none of these things aren't true. Or if you can't do that, then tell me why they don't matter as much as I think they do. Month 6 of the coronavirus catastrophe, Boris Johnson announces that he's taking control of it. Taking control of it. The day on which we record more deaths than the rest of the European Union put together, Boris Johnson announces that he's proud of how we've done. And the reason it matters, apart from the death toll, the reason it matters is that they're still in charge. They're in charge of the test and trace system that the man running it says might not be ready till October. They're in charge of the quarantine that seems to defy all the laws of logic and threatens to destroy the last vestiges of our travel and tourism industries and our airlines. They're in charge of the plan to bring face masks in over a week from now, 10 days from now, when 2 months ago they were poo-pooing the idea that they might be a very good idea. And don't forget that every country in the world that made face masks compulsory from the get-go has done rather better than us. I mean, the real tragedy, of course, is that you can remove half the words from that last sentence and it still holds true. You could say every country in the world has done rather better than us. The only country with a higher death toll is America, but they, of course, have a much bigger population. And this question of why? What is happening? What is happening? I just would love to know what you think. You're very kind to listening to my pontifications, but I'd love to know what you think. How has this happened to your country? How has your country been made a place where essentially, do you remember Comical Ali during the Second Gulf War, during the Iraq War? One of Saddam Hussein's, for younger listeners, Saddam Hussein was the leader of Iraq, whose alleged possession of weapons of mass destruction was one of the main platforms for going to a war. Weapons he turned out subsequently not to have. But the war was a very strange exercise in news management. Again, the death toll was incredibly high, and again, perhaps we focused on different things than we should have done. But today, I look at the government, I remember the guy that they called Comical Ali. So this was a government spokesman. He could probably get a job in the White House now. And he would stand in front of the world's television cameras describing how well they were doing. And after a while, it became so ridiculous that buildings were actually exploding and burning behind him while he was describing how well they were doing at preventing the bombing of the buildings that were burning behind him. That's where we are, isn't it? Albeit, thank God, with a much smaller death toll than the Iraq War caused. We are now governed by Comical Ali. We've got 10 Comical Alis queuing up to tell us everything's fine. What are you going to do today, Priti Patel? Quarantine. Who for? People coming into our country from countries where the infection rate is lower. Pardon? So you come into the United Kingdom from a country where, let's say, there haven't been any deaths, and you have to go into quarantine in case you're bringing in something that we need protecting from. Yeah, that's the latest plan from the Comical Ali government. Face masks. Even the House of Commons has been completely rendered ridiculous by the same people. It's the same people every time.